Hey guys, so we are going to look at North America now. This is a very different type of art style from our Mexican art and our Peruvian art because we are looking at smaller individual peoples and cultures and indigenous tribes in our US-Canada region. So it's not these big empires like the Maya, Inca, Aztec, or Chavin, or any of those kind of societies. We're looking at more individual places as they are being influenced by the land, nature, resources, the time period, colonization later on, and sometimes each other. So we're going to see very individualized art in our North American pieces here, starting with Mesa Verde cliff dwellings in Montezuma County, Colorado. Our culture here is the Anasazi, or ancestral Pueblan. So if you've heard of the Pueblo people, it's kind of this generic term for the indigenous tribes that used these kind of either sandstone or more earthy type of buildings in this region. So we're looking specifically at the Anasazi of those Pueblans. This is a very early piece considering the later North American art we're going to look at. So 450 to 1300 CE, very big gap because it was added to, moved in and out, all that kind of stuff. And we're looking at sandstone. So like our normal kind of sedimentary rock for this. And you can see that sandstone in that light beigey color. Right off the bat, when you're looking at it, the way to tell Mesa Verde, you're looking at a cliff. It is in the cliff dwellings. And they have these large circular sections here. Those are called kivas. That's probably the biggest takeaway is those kivas because it's both interesting visually and contextually. So there's a couple words there for you guys. Pueblans, known for their rituals and were mainly farmers. There's a lot deeper history there, but just as an overview. And the kivas are chambers that were mainly built underground, and they're used for religious ceremony. So you need to associate kiva with the Mesa Cliff dwellings. So here's images of the kiva right there. So you can see it goes underground. It does have some religious ceremonies that take place there. Here's a view of it from far off. Really interesting site to try to build a little city into. So not easy to get to, so that may play into the context. Why would they put it in a mountain? Interesting. Here's some more images, and you can see kind of how high up these cliffs are. Very, very high up. Colorado has a very high altitude already. And close-up of those different walls. Very different method than the Incan. See how there's mortar in between? So that kind of cementing that's putting those sandstones together. That's why, like the Incan stuff, very impressive that it was not mortar. Colorado doesn't get as much earthquakes, so you're not going to see as much of that kind of earthquake-proofing architecture. If you want to watch a video about Mesa Verde, I highly encourage the Smart History video on this one. It's a pretty good deep dive, so highly recommend. But some quick little overview of Mesa Verde. We are looking at the Four Corners environment, Four Corners being the four corner states that kind of touch in the U.S. The environment there, it's semi-arid, so it's kind of like deserty. It's very dry, kind of like here. It rains, but it's irregular, so there's not a consistent like rainy season, like it's happening in fall and winter, but not like the day-to-day. The temperatures are very extreme, so the day warm, night cold, and then that translates into the cold winters. If you know anything about Colorado, you probably know that it is cold and it snows quite a lot. So the Anasazi had to kind of work around that environment, this very arid, irregular, unpredictable, dry kind of climate, by developing advanced water storage. They're not near like big ocean or big lakes, so they're having to move the rivers with dams and reservoirs to help their farming. Farming is what creates settled communities. They're growing corn, beans, squash, your kind of regular types of vegetables and grains that you would see in that region even today. Corn's always big. We love our corn. Visually, Mesa Verde, we have about 150 rooms there. Sorry for no pictures on the slides to see. There's 4 stories, so 4 different levels, and about 20 of those kivas, those little circular religious holes. Sounded weird. But each of those buildings have these pole frames covered with adobe. That's that kind of reddish mud brick, like Mosca de Gene. But we also see very highly developed stone masonry. So the brick and the mortar all happening with these kind of earlier adobe on poles. So this combination of architectural styles. They're cutting their sandstone into rectangular blocks. They're using mud for their mortar. They're stacking them for those 150 rooms. Each of those rooms were about 6 to 8 feet, kind of 6 to 8 feet wide, long ways, whatever. So it would have fit about 2 to 3 people, we think. There's rooms for pretty much everything here. It's kind of just like a little city, right? So there's housing units, there's religious areas, there's healing centers, there's places for farming, there's open areas for families. There's pretty much everything that you think of with a tiny city. Those necessities are all there in the Mesa Verde. So the kiva would have been these underground circular regions for people to come and gather and worship or have healing done. They would pray for things like rains and crops. These are all nature deities tied into what is important to the Anasazi. So the kivas are going to be where they're practicing, praying, and hoping for good harvests and safety, etc. So here's a look at that kiva a little bit better. You have right at the bottom fire pit for the ceremonial stuff. So they're carved that out. Then we have the shield to help vent the light so it bounces, as well as the smoke that would then rise up, up through there. You got some vents to help vent it out. And here, just like our other religious site that had the vents, totally lost it right now off the top of my head, the Chavin, there we go, to help kind of carry those acoustics as well. Banquet up here so people could come sit there, and then roof support. So this would have been covered, most likely with wood, and we know what happens to wood over time. So the vent's very important for carrying that smoke out, get it out of there. We do see some murals in Mesa Verde as well, so they're a little bit more simplified than the murals that we're seeing later from like the Romans and such, but we are seeing that attention to paint. So they're stable enough as a society to be able to not only build the architecture needed, but also decorate. It's kind of all over the place. We don't have a ton of it left as paint kind of dies, we know that. But it tends to be very more geometric focused on some areas, and then animal plant focused in other areas. They're a little bit more separate. We're not sure what these mean for sure, but we know that there's other Pueblan people that use similar designs on like their ceramic pottery. So the design aesthetic sticks, we just don't have good enough understanding of what they actually are. It could be something like landscape, like this one right here. Looks like maybe it's how they're looking at the cliffs or they're farming. Maybe those are plants. Like, again, it's you can derive meaning, but it's hard for sure. They would have used organic materials for their paint because they're surrounded by nature. They would have used turquoise for blue, charcoal for black, hematite for red, so another mineral for that red color there. And then getting into the context, I think the context is really fascinating here because we don't know what happened to them, but they kind of all just poofed. All the Anasazi from this region just kind of vanished. And that kind of tied into like, why is it in cliffs in the first place? So when you are planning out a city, you have to choose like, what is the best strategy for the people here? What is going to serve them the best? What are we scared of? What do we need? What resources, et cetera, et cetera. So we're thinking that people started in the valleys below first and then moved to the cliffs a little later, potentially to get closer to a water source, right? So that's a theory, that they're trying to go up to the cliffs to get closer to that water instead of going down in that valley. We also think that the higher elevation also just had more water, right? You need water for plants, and your valley ain't getting the rain. Think about over here. Tulare doesn't get rain too often, but the mountains that we can see on good days get rain a lot more often. Higher up you go, you tend to hit the clouds faster. Also could be just protection. Having your city built into a mountain means you got a nice shield for wind and snow and cold, and you're tucked in there. It's a lot safer away from the environment. So protection and water are basically those main ideas. And tying that into like, okay, but how are they getting water? They're doing the irrigation through the cliffs so that the rainwater can flow through the cliff walls from these little seeps that they're putting in. So they're carving into the mountain to channel it down into their crops and basins, etc. Really cool, fascinating thing. People, when they need water, they're going to figure out how to get water. There is kind of a larger cliff palace. So the largest of the room we call the Cliff Palace. We know it was a residential building. We know it was ceremonial because of the objects found there, the fact that it can support multiple people, probably multiple families, and the kiva is being tied into ceremony. So it is functionally for residents and ceremonies, religion, and your average day-to-day. So that Cliff Palace itself has the 150 rooms and the 20 kivas. The Mesa Verde just kind of span on for a while, but we're focusing on the Cliff Palace. More about the kivas. Like the picture showed, there's a fire pit, ventilation shaft, a deflector. Oh, right, it also stops the wind. Bounces light, stops some wind. We don't want wind putting out our fire, right? And then that roof that would have been supported by the columns that you saw there. We don't have the roofs anymore. But the kivas do still get used occasionally for some ceremonies. There's some staircases, all that kind of stuff. It's a very accessible site still. So people do come in and use it, especially those tied to the Puebloan people. Here's the kind of overall map of the cliff dwellings. So you can see here they're really carving into this mountain. It's pretty dense, and you can see all those individual kivas. Each of those squares a different housing unit. We have streets, we have courts, we have all the different things that you need to be successful in a city, and organized by quarters, bigger houses in some regions, smaller houses in others. Then, like I said, it was abandoned. Poof, gone. Don't know. We have no idea. But theories. They went up to the mountains for water. Uh-oh, a drought happens. So if a drought happens, you're going to leave because you went up to the cliffs for water, and then all of a sudden there's no water. So we think probably a drought happened because it lines up in about 1276 to 1299, major drought, caused loss of resources, so they just got to move to get some better resources, which ties into just overall theory about resource depletion. Maybe the stored food went bad, maybe the fertility for the soil went down and they can't grow crops as well. Maybe the animals above and below the cliffs were not around anymore. When people hunt, it changes kind of that ecosystem. Or maybe the trees are all gone. You lose trees, you need trees for heating and cooking, and you're a little bit limited when you're stuck in the middle of a mountain, right? So, drought, resources. The last theory is potentially social political problems. There could have been another tribe that kind of threatened them, that forced them out and to move, but then we don't, there's some evidence that there's those interactions, but not enough because the cliffs are still there, the dwellings are still there. It just is like they up and vanished instead of seeing like a war-torn kind of region, if that makes sense. So it could just be internal problems as well. Who knows? I think personally the drought and the resources are more likely, but social political problems always make people want to move. So it makes sense. Next artwork we have, love this one, it's so cool. Great Serpent Mound. This is in Adams County, southern Ohio. So we have Colorado, now we have Ohio. The culture here is the Mississippian or the Eastern Woodlands tribe. They would have had a different name, but College Board wants this name. Mississippian refers to those along kind of the Mississippi River. Mississippi River is a huge river in the U.S., and Ohio kind of touches that region. We think this is made in 1070, have good resources to identify that, and it is an earthwork or an effigy mound. So earthwork, new media for us. Earthwork is kind of basically what it sounds like. It's anytime an artist is using the earth to create their art. You could think like crop circles, or we're gonna have later earthworks in our modern stuff. Technically like a golf course is earthwork, but it's function over aesthetic, right? And then effigy mound we'll get into with the context. So earthwork is good enough for the media on this one. Great Serpent Mound. Looks like a snake. Here's some close-ups so you can kind of see it's pretty low to the ground, but because of the sun hitting it, you see a lot of the light, the shadow, the value contrast. You see that good sense of movement. We love the movement. She is cute. Have a little bit of spiraling there. The repetition of those curves create a nice visual rhythm as it moves through. And it has a really nice sense of unity because of that grass on top, uniting it through color and texture. So the woodland tribes, very diverse, had some great representatives of the woodland tribes a few classes back, which was really cool. They have some really beautiful beadwork that they do. They do these effigy mounds. They're doing a lot of corn and beans and squash. Those are like the big three. They're known as the Three Sisters. One of the major woodland tribes is the Iroquois. If you've heard of more Native American tribes, you've probably heard of the Iroquois. So corn, bean, squash, Three Sisters. There's hunting, there's fishing. They're using sap from maple trees to make maple syrup. Hooray, we love syrup. Their clothing is very ornate, gorgeous, very geometric. You have these ribbon elements in there. The ribbons are tied to ceremonial stuff. Their pottery, even today, takes on this nice geometric style. Beautiful, beautiful stuff by Woodlands. So, Great Serpent Mound. There's some weird rumors talking about dead bodies hiding in the mounds. I want you to get that out of your head. I'm sorry, I probably was the one that put it in your head, but if you ever watch a video on the Great Serpent Mound, they always go like, are there bodies hidden here? Did the aliens put them there? It's, you know, kind of like that. And when you look at it, it feels very much like burials. And the tribes that did the Great Serpent Mound did bury around the serpent. So it's not bodies in the snake itself, but there is some bodies found around that region. So it could have a funerary purpose, but not so much. So, bloop, get that one out of your head mostly. We don't know for sure what the meaning is though. But as we've seen in a lot of different civilizations, calendars, directions, stars, all of those important celestial and geographical ideas are pretty consistent through a lot of different cultures. So we think this could be tied to maybe some rituals connected to snakes. Snakes are powerful, and snakes are incorporated in other rituals within the woodland tribes, and it has this kind of supernatural sense. But this could also be tied into marking of the seasons. The way these little lumps, these curves point help highlight where the sun is located in each of those seasons. So you could kind of see the shadow stretching, right? That shadow stretching there. So the head of the snake aligns with the summer solstice when it has sunset. So when the sun's setting, it lines up, boom, right at the head. The tail lines up with winter sunrise. So that sunrise going by the tail. And then each of the lumps then line up with lunar phases and also line up with different equinoxes. It's kind of crazy how celestial this piece is. And it's all labeled here where you have summer solstice, winter solstice, all of that nice and labeled. So probably marking seasons. Seasons are important, especially in agricultural regions, because it helps know when to grow, harvest, plant, etc. Other things that might be related to the function, the snake head, right there, points towards the North Pole. So it could be more of a star-based map. So you can kind of see this here where you have the Greek version would be Draco, right? This constellation here, and then one of our dippers. I think that's a Little Dipper. My brain just fried. Little Dipper's got the North Star. So you can kind of see how it lines up with Draco or Draco and the North Pole because there is a separate mound off to here. I think still personally the seasonal one makes most sense. One other thing that it could be is in relation to Halley's Comet, which was a big comet event way back when, around the time period that this was made. And it could be documenting the path that the comet took, or just talking about, oh, look at the magical sky thing that happened. Interesting, let's make a mound to mark the occasion as an effigy. So lots of different theories. It's really cool visually to me. That's why I like Great Serpent Mound. The unknown aspect of the function makes it a really fun one to talk about too. You could argue any of them: seasonal, snake superpowers, compass, Halley's Comet, potentially burial meaning, but not in the mound. Very interesting. So that's the big stuff with Great Serpent Mound. Some additional context. The Mississippian woodland tribes takes up a lot of the U.S. region, so it's kind of pushing together a bunch of different tribes, like the Iroquois, for example. So we're seeing them in Ohio, Missouri, Mississippi, Illinois, all before colonization happens. This is along kind of the river area. And they're all using that same like three sister method where you have corns, you have bean, you have squash. Corns, bean, and squash. We don't have written records. We have oral tradition that's kept, but oral history gets lost often. Towards more the upper Midwest, effigy mounds often happened in animal shapes, animal figures, right? But those mounds were destroyed by European settlers. Yay! Woohoo, colonization, right? Because you don't want people praying or honoring things that aren't Europe. And people get, killed and moved and pushed out of the way or forced conversion because Europe wants more. Europe always wants more. So unfortunately, we lose the history there too. The mound could have been a restoration piece as well. They could have brought it back. We see seasonal movement in that area, so tied into that as well. Cardinal directions are very important to the woodland tribes, as cardinal directions have been important in all the Americas and other civilizations we've looked at, but their cardinal directions have specific meaning that help define different ceremonies, different parts of the religion, different kind of cosmological stuff, as well as agricultural. Lots of stuff. So there are the four directions. North is the bear. Then east is the eagle. South is the deer and mouse. West is the bear. East tends to mean new beginnings and birth. West tends to mean protection, guidance, health, and healing. The reason why east and west are underlined here is because that's the alignment of our Great Serpent Mound. It goes along the east-west direction. So cardinal direction is very important. They're also tied to those colors, those animals, and the different concepts within each of those. So you can see all of that, lots of cool information there. And then check out this video to hear about the Song of the Eagle, Song of the East, from one of the tribes. Boop. There we go. This is pretty much same idea. The way that it was created though, stone first, then dirt, more stone, mound. Yay! Layering dirt and stone together to create the mound. It's about 1,300 feet long, 4 to 5 feet high, 20 to 25 feet wide, and it follows the natural topography. Super cool. We know it's a snake. And that kind of all the same concepts. Sorry for doubling up there. Snakes are also tied to the underworld. Often there's a snake deity that tied to the underworld, so there's some better connection to the funerary stuff, but also still calendars. You can see how it lines up with our summer solstice, sunset, and then each of those different ideas. Moving on to the next one, we have the bandolier bag. Bandolier bag, bandolier. I never pronounce it right, and I'm so sorry. But this is from the Lenape people. So the Lenape are our culture here. This is a Delaware tribe in the eastern woodlands. So same collection of tribes, but as Great Serpent Mound, but now we're specifically looking at the Lenape. The bandolier bag is really impressive because you're like, oh, it's a little cute little thing. That's all beadwork. It's all beads. So beadwork on leather. And this one in particular is made after colonization happened. So 1850, the US is officially a thing already, and the post-colonization world actually influences the look and style of this bandolier bag made by the Lenape. So you can see some close-ups here. We're looking at these beautiful applique. Applique is ornamental needlework where fabrics are sewn together. So like a small fabric on top of a large fabric, and it's very ornate. So super, super pretty to create patterns and pictures. And then there's beadwork on top of that. Beautiful, beautiful beadwork. Think Aka elephant mask, same kind of intention to detail. A bandolier, so breaking it down, right? A bandolier is the top part here. And then the bag's on the bottom, right? So we're looking at some red trimming around the entire cloth. So that red, we see these tassels hanging down from the bandolier. We see floral blue, we see black, green, pink, all weaving together in this geometric pattern with these trapezoidal extensions. See how it's a trapezoid? Boom, boom, right there. These long rectangles that formed the bandolier would have reached like below the waist, but not past too much because you don't want it to be hard to walk. So this is a bag. This is fancy purse, basically. So this is the shoulder strap, and then you would wear it crossbody, and then this would land at your hip. Right? So the front, very pretty. The inside is left to that leather, so it's nice and comfortable to wear. Lots of positive, negative space to create bright, fun, contrasting colors. The bag, very similar, same kind of patterning, but you can see the ornate details a little bit smaller. There's tassels on the opening of the bag. It's thinner and shorter than the bandolier, but it echoes the design, creating a sense of unity. So these are two kind of separate pieces that come together as one. When we're looking at that beadwork, we are looking at the specific cloth here known as calico. Kind of like the cat. Look, you can see a bag being worn there, so that's how it would have been worn. So this would have been a type of cloth, a cotton cloth that would have been gotten from India to England, then to the US to these tribes. So we're seeing that earlier Silk Road exchange into colonization exchange, because England took over India too. Yay, England. Which brought this material over for the Lenape to use. So yay, more cotton for our colonization. The patterning is very like southwestern style, even though this is a Delaware tribe. This is more kind of what you would see in like the Arizona region. So the tribes have interacted. We see a lot of mushing of cultures as Europe plows through the U.S. It's very bold, very organic, very geometrical, and all that duality of high contrast, organic, geometric, is in reference to upper and lower worlds. Think Jade Song, like totally not related, but the same kind of contrast of the circle to square, the heavens and the earth. We have organic and geometric, dark and light, representing upper and lower worlds. This is also, it got some prairie influence, so another different tribe that does this beadwork practice is taken from the prairie groups, and the Lenape are using that to create this bag. So it's found within the Delaware tribes, but it was most likely made in like Kansas or Oklahoma because of the style that we see here. Tiny, tiny beads. So they're putting the tiny beads to create these abstract symmetrical designs, lots of contrast. To get the beads through, they are using porcupine quills to create the color. So they're seed beads because they're bright, right? And then there's dyed porcupine quills that then they're using as the base for the color. I'll try to find a video and attach that because this is a little confusing and I apologize. Porcupine quills, seeds, pretty colors, make beads go burr. And we would have seen this as a reaction to like kind of trade at that time. We're trading cloth, we're trading hide, and they would have traded the beadwork for the calico. There's that calico there. So it's this interaction of society within the tribes and with the European settlers, which are now Americans, because this is post-US being a thing. The beads also would have made a sound. So it would have been worn to make little tinkling sounds and reflect the light. It would have been more than just a bag, right? Here's some other examples of bandolier bags from other people. So we have a Muskogee tribe here, very dramatic. The Navajo tends to be more focused on that leather work. The Seminole people, much more ornate. Cherokee is more of that organic within those other types of tassels. So bandoliers are across the states with different styles depending on the different tribes. Context-wise, this is actually based on European bags, specifically ones worn by soldiers. So soldiers would wear these like crossbody bags to carry ammunition. So if you think of like your canvas tote bags that we even still have today, that was like a European war thing. They would have put their bullets in there. But the bandolier bags are made just to kind of look pretty. It's to show off. It's not to hold anything. It has like extra pockets and no pocket. Like it's all aesthetic just to look nice. So you can see the two crossbody bandolier bags there, kind of referencing the ammunition being worn by other soldiers in the region, Zapatistas and all that, or their ammunition's that way. The way you carry ammunition changes where you're at. But these pretty bags are made to be pretty. They were worn by both men and women. Sorry, let me take that back. They were worn by men, made by women, and this would be on special occasions. They're often using more than one bag at a time. It is very much like the ahu'ula or the takapu cloth. Any of those type of show-offy social status kind of garments. Same thing's happening here. We're looking at group identity because each tribe has a different style. We're connecting it to the tribes. We're seeing how ornate it is, how ornate's going to determine your social status. So we're preserving Lenape style here as they're facing this fear of being displaced, moved, killed off, losing their culture, etc. So the bandolier bag is a way of expressing that. It's influenced by Europe but becomes distinctly Native American. There's more information about the bandolier bag. That's the most important stuff, specifically about the Lenape. They were originally from Delaware, so like Virginia, Massachusetts region, but got shoved out, yay, because Europe wanted to take that land, that region. The States was building and becoming more settled. Specifically William Penn here, Penn as in Pennsylvania. He's signing a treaty in 1683 to create Philadelphia. So it was called the City of Brotherly Love, but now it's Philadelphia. So Philly cheesesteak sandwich because of William Penn, yay. But after he died in 1718, his son started selling all the tribal lands there illegally, yay. So the tribes are kind of like, they agree to sell their land, but they're tricked into giving more land because of language barriers, etc. And the Iroquois were called upon to force out, Lenape. So as they pushed the natives against themselves as well, because there's different tribes, they're against the settlers. So in 1741, we're forcing out people to the west. Lenape set up a military alliance with the U.S. in 1778, which is a big deal because that's, American Revolution. But the Lenape say, give us a state, recognize us, we will give you aid. The U.S. were like, okay, I heard you're going to give us aid. Cool. And that was it. And so the Lenape did not get a state. They did not get congressional representation. But the U.S. used the Lenape in trying to fend off the Europeans in the name of freedom. Yay, irony. So it's a big, messy history that goes into this style of bag that is ornamental, show-offy, to show that kind of cultural connection. Here's some other in the Eastern Prairie style, so you can see how the Lenape are using that style in their bags. And here's some information about some of the reservation systems and the pushing westward. So you start Delaware, you get into this region, you keep getting pushed west and west and west, which helps, kind of like the Silk Road, show off the different indigenous styles, but they're being pushed west because they're literally removed from their homes, forced out. And Europe goes like, oh, your art's so pretty. I like that. Bye-bye. So the beadwork becomes fun, but they have no homes. We love it. Here's a video that kind of goes into that style. I already posted it, of how they did the beadwork. So if you're interested, look at how gorgeous that is. Those are glass beads. That would have been like those seed beads, and they would have used porcupine quills for the coloring. Next piece, we're moving and grooving. Painted elk hide. This is attributed to Katsiogo or Kadzikodi, two different names. So there's an actual artist that we attribute this to. This would have been part of the Shoshone tribe, Eastern Shoshone specifically, located in Wyoming. Wyoming's close to Colorado. This would have been a prairie group, as you can see by the bison all over it. Bison were in the prairies, 1890 to 1900, painted elk hide. So this would have been from a hunted elk, skinned, tanned, defurred, and then painted on. So the painted elk hide is perfectly captures the relationship between the Eastern Shoshone and the land in which they inhabited. So even though they were pushed into this region, we're seeing them interact with nature in similar ways. This is where, like, Shoshone are kind of the tribes where you see that feather headdress. A lot of the times, feathers are very important. Eagles are powerful creatures, so you're using kind of powerful birds in those headdresses. You see bison. Bison were hunted for meat, fur, clothing, etc. The idea was to use every part of the animal to pay the most respect to the animal. Unfortunately, bison got overhunted by pretty much everyone. Europe was like, oh, look, that's interesting, and Europe becomes America. Anyway, they're almost extinct. Yay. But you can see horses here, which horses would have come from the Europeans along the Silk Road, introduced into this region to help with hunting. So European brought the horses, and the Shoshone used horses in hunting the bison. The painting is all natural. I know it's already natural because it's an elk. It's the skin of an elk, which is a deer-like thing. But the pigments, the paint, are also natural. Paint, plants, minerals, all crushed up to make colors, similar to all the other paints we've looked at. Around this time, though, there was a lot of synthetic paints that were starting to kind of be developed. Oil paint was very popular at this time period. So we're still seeing that attention to nature here. We would have seen, in this piece, we're seeing a freehand and stenciling. Stenciling is when you have, like, basically kind of like a tracing type thing. I don't even know how to describe it, but you see how the teepees are basically the same shape? That could have been a stencil. The horses that have a lot of movement, probably people. So anytime you see that repetition, it could have been a stencil that they're copying. We see animals and humans. They're both being depicted in bright, bold colors, so you're seeing that attention to the equal weight of human and animal. There's some abstract shapes in there to represent different complex figures. We see the outer edge depicting a buffalo hunt, or bison hunt, sorry. There's men on horseback. They have bows and arrows. They're chasing the buffalo. But ironically, the buffalo actually were not being hunted at this time the artwork was made. So it's kind of honoring the past. So the artist, Katsikoti, is kind of honoring the history of that. In the center, we see a Sundance ceremony. So this thing right here, right there. Sundance ceremony would have been performed when, like, the sun set, and there would have been lots of music and drums and male performers and dancing and celebrating, and this very religious ceremony that ties into that. Incense, all that kind of ceremonial stuff. Unfortunately, around this time, the Sundance ceremony was banned in the U.S. by the government, so this painting is also showing that ancestral worship and kind of going, no, this is who we are. Buffalo hunting, Sundance Festival, this is Shoshone. So Katsikoti, or Kotsiogo. Katsikoti is the European version of the name, so Kotsiogo was a member of the Eastern Shoshone tribe. Painted a lot, especially on the animal hides. He used deer, elk, buffalo, always used natural pigments, always things like chalk and red ochre, the things that we saw way back in global prehistory, he's using in his art. The Shoshone were actually semi-nomadic. A lot of the prairie groups were, because they had to follow the hunt. They were more of a hunting group than a farming group. So they would settle for a while and then move when the animals moved. When we had that Indian Removal Act of 1830, Indian meaning Native American, not India here, they were forced to move over to a reservation in Wyoming, 1868. So that lines up right when this painted elk hide happened. History would have been done orally, so this painting is copying that oral tradition. The paintings on animal hides are actually a Great Basin kind of thing, so a little bit further to the east, but they got pushed to the west. Animal painting was used to record history as a visual aid to the oral history. So like Lukasa memory board, it's that mnemonic device. Animals are always depicted as being very important. The buffalo was their source of food. Horses were used for hunting. They're showing respect to the animals, and they use every part of the animal in some way. So nothing gets wasted. The Wind River Reservation was hit with a lot of poverty, especially as the U.S. government was pushing people out, not providing, saying they would provide, but just kidding, and also all the leading cause of death and illness that wiped out a lot of this population meant that the natives were struggling to like keep their culture alive and keep it together because every odd was stacked against them. So Shoshone, as well as other tribes, are trying to create art that replicates and captures their culture and also sell their art so that they can make money to sustain their people. So a lot of Native American artwork is sold in mass quantity to help the tribe because of the position that they got put into. In particular, the Sundance that we're seeing here is a sacred ceremony to help honor the creator of Earth's bounty, so kind of this harvest and hunting ritual, so helping to make sure that the hunt continues. Here's the more offensive things. Not only were the people pushed and killed and converted, etc., but the buffalo were hunted, like I said, kind of to the brink of extinction. European Americans did not care for the proper hunting ways of the Shoshone and other game hunting tribes that did it to sustain their life. European Americans were targeting the buffalo to go like, oh, look at me, I hunted a buffalo, isn't that great? But also, if you kill the food source, you can kill off the tribe. The Shoshone aren't a problem and won't ask for anything if we just get rid of all of their food. Horrible, horrible tactics against human beings. Horrible, horrible. So not only are they pushing people out of their homes, saying you cannot perform your festivals. Disease had run its course by now, but wiped out most of the native population. But they're also getting rid of their food source, making sure that they can't exist. There was, in 1883, to kind of offset this horrendous stuff, Code of Indian Offenses. Sorry, said that wrong. Code of Indian Offenses, again, because we're using the word Indian instead of Native, is restricting those practices, and then it's not taken away until 1978. So Jimmy Carter finally was like, American Indian Religious Freedom Act, you can celebrate whatever you want now. Yay! Took to the 1970s. Crazy. Ugly part about American history. Alright, so our next piece here is Black on Black Ceramic Vessel. This is by Maria Martinez and Julian Martinez, so they're a couple. And we have it from San Ildefonso Pueblo in New Mexico. Our culture, we're looking at another Puebloan people, specifically the Tewa, mid-20th century, so we're dealing with the 1900s, and this is blackware ceramic. Now, the creation of this piece is probably the most interesting aspect of it, as well as the context, because we have this black on black look, which is very unique to this specific area, and it's a tradition that has carried on. You can go to New Mexico right now and buy some black on black pottery just like this, inspired by these artists. So the artists, Maria and Julian, they were working to create this very clear style that represented the Puebloan people in New Mexico and also help raise revenue for their people, as we discussed, things weren't too good for native population because of colonization and then America sweeping through and pushing natives as far west as they could. We have very clear stylistic choice besides the black on black, where we have these large geometric figures and patterns all mixed in. It kind of references the basket weaving tradition of the region as well, so all of their aesthetic is tied into this mix of geometric and organic, very stylized pieces. We're specifically looking at an oya, which is a rounded pot with a matte burnishing. Burnishing is a very different process than doing like glazeware, so my ceramic people out there. This is not glazing it black, but it's taking a black clay or a darker earthenware clay and then polishing the ceramic with a stone. You can actually do it with a spoon. You would do this in the leather hard stage and keep burnishing, polishing until it's shiny while it's leather hard. Once it's fired, it then comes out nice and shiny in those regions that you burnish. That's how a lot of early pottery was done, was through this burnishing process rather than glaze, because it took a while for glaze to be invented and get to the high temperatures needed for glaze to work. This style, this polychrome, this black on black style, is what makes this piece part of the 250. It's super elegant, very pretty, very decorative, but we have this beautiful contrast of the burnished shiny black that you see on the pot with the matte black from the firing process. The designs are all based on Waco paint, which is a natural kind of phenomenon there. You'll see rain clouds, bird feathers, corn, rivers, anything that is very nature themed. Sometimes we see horned serpents. We have creatures that are both present and more supernatural in the style of pottery. So you can see some more examples there. It's not always the round oya pot, but double figures. Really, the black on black tells you this is the Martinez's. So contextually, ceramic is really tied into the Pueblan people. There's a lot of that adobe and earthenware clay in the region. So they're making a lot of that ceramic reference the clay tradition of the people there. Instead of like making art just as quickly as possible, they are doing art to show off the identity of the Pueblan, but they sell it to like each other at first, but then it reaches to non-native art audiences, because people that are not around the native population, they look at this and they're like, oh, this is really cool, this is really pretty, I want some. So that's really great way of making that money for the community. And we get this husband-wife team of the Martinez's, where traditionally women make the clay, they make the pottery, and then men paint the designs. This one in particular was done using the coiling method, so doing these little snakes of clay, stack to get that shape, and then burnishing afterwards. They always signed their pieces at the bottom, so a little artist signature. And then Maria would actually sign other people's work with her name. It's really interesting. The Martinez's were fascinating as artists because they're really humble. They're not in it for themselves. They're in it for their people. It's a community activity. It's coming together to bring men and women together, to bring the society together. And they're firing these vessels in these large open air kilns. And they're doing it with manure so that it removes all the oxygen and creates that black tone. It's also in this kind of raku tradition. If you've done ceramics, raku is a little bit different in the firing process, where you remove it early so it kind of burns it a little bit more. And then they're also adding like volcanic ash and shards of other broken pot to make it super strong and that nice rich dark color. So if you are interested in how they made it, there is a video there. Oop, I'm going forward, sorry. And then I'm going to go back real quick to talk. One more aspect about the Martinez's is after they kind of finished doing the art themselves, the people there, all the artists that continue making pottery, they kept the black on black method. I'm actually friends with someone on Facebook that does this black and black method in New Mexico still to the day. That is part of the Pueblan people. And the Martinez's, while they were around, would sign all of them so that it upped the value of these pieces, so the community is getting more money. So they were so not in it for themselves. So that created this more prestigious kind of look at the black on black pottery rather than just any pot that you can buy. It was artist style, black on black is so fancy kind of pottery. So it elevated it in a non-native audience. When they're really cool, they look gorgeous, but know the burnishing and know this idea of community first with the design. Gonna forward again. Sorry. There we go. And I believe this is our last piece for North America, which is the transformation mask. There are two pictures here because this is it closed, this is it open. You can see that string connected to the eyes that could be pulled closed to transform into an eagle, to man. This is in Canada, northwest coast of Canada, and it's a kwak-a-wak-a-wak. Yep, kwak-a-wak-a-wak. So people get always scared of pronouncing this one, but if you think like Pac-Man noises, kwak-a-wak-a-wak, then you're good. Late 19th century, so we're dealing with the 1800s, and it's wood, paint, and string. Here's a little bit bigger picture of the human version. Here's some details on that wood painted design. We're looking at First Nations in Canada, so the Indigenous people in Canada are known as First Nations. This would have been a trickster god or goddess, so we're dealing with this idea of someone that is really smart but plays it up. Think Loki from Marvel / Norse mythology, right? So it's a trickster god. We see this form line style. That's this style that we see here. Form line style you're going to want to know for this piece. Form line style. That's very much that northwest coast of Canada style where you see U shapes and S shapes all together in these kind of ovoids. So you see ovoids and then U's and S's all kind of working together. And Numayan or Namina are a group of fellows of the same kind. These are groups that share common ancestors, so if you see that word pop up. Here's some other transformation masks. The key to the transformation mask is it's gonna have two aspects because it has to transform to be a transformation mask. So when these were performed, you would have two separate images. In this one, we have this large, over-exaggerated eagle head with a super large beak that's emphasized to show off the power of that eagle. Eagle's a very powerful creature. We see these bright reds, yellows, and blues, hair that's made out of string using natural pigments from plants and minerals to create these kind of bright colors. The transformation masks would later use more synthetic colors, think like paints you could buy at the store, but these early ones are all very natural. As it is being performed, it is going to open up to show the human face. So the performer pulls the string in the back for it to open up, shows the face of an ancestor. So the idea of ancestors or Numayan, Numina, sorry on pronunciation there. But it also echoes the idea of the bird opening its wings. So you get that consistency between the eagle opening wings and then this human face emerges. We see the form line style. It's bilaterally symmetrical, meaning it's symmetrical in two ways, so horizontal and vertical. We see U shapes, S shapes, ovoid eyes, ovoid meaning oval. We have wavy calligraphic lines, so those curvilinear lines. And typically this is going to be carved out of red cedar wood because that's a very important and common material in that region. So the red cedar wood gets a nice red coloration underneath it all. Contextually, the kwak-a-wak-a-wak are one of the many groups that are in that western coast of Canada. The bands, so think about those cardinal directions again. There were 4 clans within the Kwakwaka'wakw: the killer whale, the eagle, the raven, and the wolf clan. So you can assume we're looking at an eagle clan since we have an eagle mask. They're divided based off of that previous ancestral tie, the Numayan. The Numayans were responsible for keeping these sacred crests safe, and there's specific rites and ceremonies attached to each of those clans' animals. And that animal transformation would be showing off from the animal of the crest to the ancestor inside. These transformation ceremonies would have been worn during potlatches, which are the name of the ceremonies. The host would be displaying his status. They would be giving away gifts, doing lots of like partying, food, best kind of gathering you could do. Think like fancy balls in Europe. That's the potlatch here. And then during that potlatch, we're going to have dancers that are come out, and they're going to wear the mask, wear their regalia, and they're showing off social position, family ties, genealogy, the idea of family and ancestors, so important to the Kwakwaka'wakw. And then those crest symbols, hence we see the eagle because it's tied to that eagle clan. And the idea is as they're dancing, the actual ancestors' spirits embody the dancers while they're wearing it. So very similar to like female deity, but in the moment. You could think Mblo is kind of honoring an ancestor, this one's embodying it. Or the Chakwe masks were embodying femininity, or Bundu is showing off puberty for women. So every mask that we've seen has a very different kind of place within their dance and those performance, and it's never just the mask, so always remember it. Here's a picture of some of those transformation masks. You can see it's kind of very like the Malangan mask and the Book mask, the very Pacific kind of look. We love geometry in these kind of cultures, but we have them from very different parts of the world, and yet people like making masks and performing. Performance is so innately human. It's wonderful to see multiple cultures do it. Some more information contextually. The costumes themselves would have also been made out of red cedar bark. That's why you see that kind of stringy look to those costumes there. These would have taken months, sometimes years to create, just like those Malangan masks from Melanesia way back when. There would have been other organic materials to help put those costumes together. We just don't have that because they decay a little bit faster. There were various different carving techniques. We're looking at the 1800s, so this is post-colonization, so traditional stuff, traditional carving mixed with European carving, mixed with stuff from China, because Silk Road to Europe, you know, all of the cultural soup that has happened at this point. We also are looking at anytime we have birds in North America, we're tying to potential like ravens are tricksters, thunderbirds are tricksters, these more trickstery supernaturals. So eagles are powerful, but they're also smart. That's where that idea of a trickster comes in. The masks would have been passed down to family members within that clan, and it would have been a sign of that person's rank. There was a weird zone in which we have the colonizers getting confused because they react before they think, and they saw these potlatches and they were like, oh my god, it's cannibals. Yeah, make it make sense. I don't know. But they banned potlatches, they confiscated the masks, they destroyed a bunch of them. Anything that wasn't destroyed got put in a museum away from the First Nations, and then once the ban was lifted years and years and years later, then they still haven't given them back. So First Nations are trying to get their stuff back. It's going. They're trying. Keep trying, guys. Museums are tricky that way, right? But potlatches are still practiced in the Northwest Coast, so super cool. So that's North America. We'll do New Spain next time.